we're finding is it's a discussion, as it is in the Sunday Times today, about reflecting on Nicola Sturgeon's position in the wider political environment, because it also, of course, marks 15 years since the Holyrood election in 2007, which brought the SNP to power. So as well as it being a local election, it's 15 years of the SNP government. So the Sunday Times have got some polling from Panel Base where they've asked the people what they're calling the people's verdict about these 15 years. So we have, over the past 15 years, standards in Scottish schools, for example, have and the answer there is they've got much worse, 26%, got slightly worse, 20%, stayed the same, 16%. Now, I've picked education there because that was the area, of course, that Nicola Sturgeon said she wanted to be judged on. That is a bad record. If that was your school report, you wouldn't be happy about it. Yet again, what we find, Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP still very much the dominant force. Still everyone expects them to be by far the biggest party in this election. There's really no threat to them at all. Yet the public don't think they're doing a particularly good job. So there's a disconnect with that, and you can only really think that it has got something to do with what we've just been talking about, which is, well, I'm not overly happy with how the schools or the health service are being run, but compared to the mess that we're seeing at Westminster, it's the best of the two possibilities.
Although you wouldn't expect that would hurt Labour in the same way, and yet Sir John Curtis was saying that Labour, expected to be the second biggest party in Scotland as a result of the council elections. So, I mean, is it about the Constitution? Is that the main motivation for people voting in this election?
I think the Constitution in Scotland overshadows almost everything when it comes to who you vote for, because if you back independence, you're going to vote for the SNP because you want a referendum, whatever level of government that is at. And I think it was really interesting listening to John Curtis, and I've done an interview with him that's in the Sun today, and he talks about, you might get pockets of people who decide that they like their local SNP candidate and they wouldn't usually back them because they don't want a referendum, but there's enough people on the other side who will do the same for the Conservatives or Labour. So when you look at it, when we get those results through at the weekend, it's going to be very political. People will have voted based on whether they like Boris Johnson, whether they like Nicola Sturgeon, whether they want a referendum or whether they don't. And I think one of the biggest things that will be that shift from the Conservatives, who haven't come, I think it was 2016, they moved into second place in Scotland, and they've kind of stood firm, and they haven't moved from then, but we'll now see Labour go back, and that's what everybody seems to expect, that Labour will pick up second position at this referendum, this election on Thursday. And I think it's really interesting, his comments to me and to the Sunday Times today about the fragmentation and division that this will then cause on the pro-union side, and the impact that will have on the pro-union side when we start talking about a referendum, because we know, as John Curtis says, when the SNP get their results in, which is expected to be better than previously at the council elections, that they will use this to then talk about a referendum. It was in the manifesto, use it to push forward, and then we'll have the general election, which will probably be the next stage.
But the problem for the unionist side is splintered in a way that the pro-independent side isn't. It's split between Labour, the Tories and the Lib Dems, and it does seem that, when the Conservatives aren't doing well at Westminster, that might well impact on the Scottish Tory vote. But as David was saying, when the SNP are perceived by some voters to be failing, it doesn't necessarily impact on their votes.
No, it doesn't. And that's one of the biggest coups that the SNP have, that they're the only real party on the pro-independent side that's got a chance of getting anywhere. We have obviously the ALPA party, but they don't pick up many votes. They're not expected to do well this week. So all the independent support goes to the one party, really. The Greens get some of it, but the pro-union side is split between three parties. You've got Labour voters who will just not vote Conservative. You have Conservative voters who will just not vote Labour. So they're never going to corral behind the one pro-union party in Scotland. And it leaves us with this, that the SNP continue to get very good support. They continue to get into power and government, even though, as the Sunday Times shows, that people aren't necessarily happy with their domestic record.
And just one extra little wrinkle on that, which I think is quite interesting, is that as well as this constitutional thing, so the SNP, while the Constitution is an unresolved issue, are going to have that 40% of support, which seems fairly built in. And as we're seeing from the Sunday Times today, actually their efficiency in government doesn't seem to impact on how people feel about that. But there's also then their ability to also be in opposition as well as in government because of their role at Westminster and the way that they're very much the focus focus in the UK media, in fact, at the minute, at calling out the problems at Westminster and the issues we've been discussing already. So you just have this very fertile ground for Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP, where the external environment is very well lined up for them to constantly do well electorally.
Let's move on to care homes. The UK government was challenged in the High Court in England this week. It judged that the UK government's policy on discharging hospital patients into care homes, that was deemed unlawful. The Sunday Times has a take on this from Nicola Sturgeon's perspective.
It's actually the Sunday Post.
Sorry, Sunday Post.
The front page of the Sunday Post is taking on this story that we've seen running for a long time, but this legal aspect of it. And I actually think it's a very important story, because that care home issue and what went wrong there, I think, is genuinely accepted to be one of the most important things at the public inquiries and the audits that we're going to have to carry out about what went wrong during that early stage of the pandemic. I think this is one of the crucial issues, but it's extremely complicated. It's very hard to get your head round. And also now, if you think back to those feverish days, just piecing together the timeline and then remembering exactly what happened when is very difficult. But I think the Sunday Post do a reasonable job of trying to explain exactly what's going on here. So basically, the issue that we're talking about here is the guidance recommending 14-day isolation of anyone discharged to a care home, even if they did not have symptoms. Now, Nicola Sturgeon is saying that was the guidance from March 26th. But the point that is being brought out in the Sunday Post today is that it makes the point that 4,000 residents had died. It was only for patients who had not come into contact with COVID. So there still is this issue that they weren't testing people or isolating people properly at that point in Scotland as well as in England, even though the rules are slightly different there. So she's been accused by Labour of misleading MSPs over this, but there's still this issue about when we get to this public inquiry, which we inevitably will they have been found to have been breach of their legal responsibilities with this?